Hello, TCI family, Jonathan's Refuge, all of our supporters and followers on the church network. We appreciate you, we value you, and we love you. I love you. I don't know if you know that, but if you don't think you're loved, then you have never experienced it by any other way. Then you need to get a hold of us. You need to come out and see us. We have a local church in Marysville, Washington. It's expanded down south into Everett to another campus. Things are moving, shaking, and baking, and things are happening. God and the universe and all of our church members and those that follow us live and those that follow us in person. I thank you all for your support, your prayers, and your positive vibrations of all that you continue to send our way as we continue to send it your way. Let's get right into our message today. Okay, we're talking about what do you do when God doesn't speak? Oh, sorry. I was listening for God. You see, sometimes you're trying to get God to talk to you. And I was actually trying to prepare for the message. And normally I have just a massive amount of ideas. And I had them all set last night. I had all these ideas and everything. I had it all. And that's how I usually do it. I spend a whole week working, studying, reading, researching. And then the night before, kind of play it all in my brain one more time. And then the day of, put it down to pen and paper and make the notes and deliver what I consider to be a message of inspiration with knowledge on how to not just inspire you, but to show you the steps to complete that journey, whatever that might be. And then all of a sudden, my brain was like, boop, nothing. And my brain doesn't just freeze. So I was like, okay, God, I'm listening. What are you trying to say? And I'm walking around the office and I'm like, I don't think he's talking. I'm starting to get upset. Hey, big guy. Woo, hello, honey, you up there? I need you. Where you at? She wasn't talking. So what did I do? It hit me. Or I should say, God did. Bam, right across the head. Hey, knucklehead, he said, listen to this. I already talked to you. You have all the answers for what you're about to talk about within you. And I'm like, I do. And then instantly, all this stuff came up and it had nothing to do with what I'd already been planning. And that's the beauty of when you deliver messages, when you're in the flow with the universe and God, because then when you're with God and the universe, which is the same thing, in one flow together, here's what happens. You just don't go wrong. And so we're going to go look at the life of a guy named Joseph. For those that don't know, Joseph was a son. They had a father, and this father had 12 sons. And these sons actually became what they call the 12 tribes of Judah. So if you're familiar with Israel, there's like 12 states. They called them 12 tribes back then. So you had 12 states eventually, and each boy got a state. So you had the different tribes of all the different names of these sons. And Joseph was the youngest brother, and all of his brothers were out working in the fields and stuff in the family business. And his father loved Joseph the most. He did. He actually had this beautiful colored robe, fantastic colors, and he adorned his son with it. And his brothers were jealous. And so he went out, his dad said, take some stuff out to our sons, the boys, and see how they're doing. And he does. And he gets there and the brothers see him coming and they're sick of him. They're like, oh my God. And as a young boy, this young man had gifts. And one of his gifts was he could interpret dreams. My adopted dad is a dream expert. Blows my mind when he hears someone tell him a dream and then he can explain it. And then you watch it actually all come unfolded. You're like, what? And that's how Joseph was. And so his brothers were just sick of it. Their jealousy and they were, arrogance. And so they decided to kill him. So when he got there, they grabbed him and they threw him down a hole. And while they're up there deciding how they're going to kill him, one of his brothers was like, listen, this is our brother. He's our brother. He's our dad's favorite son. And he convinced them to not kill him. Instead, send him, trade him, sell him as a slave. He, in essence, helped save his life. Now, the guy gets sold as a slave. He goes to Egypt. Now he's in Egypt. And he's a slave. And he gets purchased by a man who was a big shot, a big shot in politics there. And he had this house, and Joseph rose to the ranks to be the top dog and administrator of this man's entire estate, all of his slaves and all of his businesses while he was out doing things for the Pharaoh and so on and doing his delegations and things that he had to do. This guy trusted Joseph with all of this? He was a slave and he grew to such prominence. Well, the guy's out working and the guy's wife tries to get Joseph, good looking young man, to have sex. And Joseph's like, whoa, no, 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 no. You're my boss's wife. That this is first off, it'd be a sin in my book. A sin meaning it would miss the mark. It wouldn't be approved by him. His morals didn't allow him, it wouldn't let him do that. And so he's like, no, I wouldn't do this. And I love my master too much. Hey, look what he's done for me. He's put me at the top of his, leadership. So he continues to move on. And this lady doesn't stop. She is a woman in heat. Okay. She is coming after him. And finally, after enough turn downs on the last one, as he was coming through, she grabbed him physically and was like, gonna, kiss him and try to make love with him. And he ran and she ripped her dress. She actually tore it and then called the guards and said he assaulted her sexually. You know what they call that in America? They actually call that attempted rape. And that is a sex offense. And he was arrested. And you would have been charged with a sex crime. You'd been on the sex registry. All these bad things. They had to beat the living crap out of you in prison, right? And that's what happened. Is he went to prison. Now, this prison he was in is horrifying, by the way. They're not pretty places. I've actually seen the prisons that they had at that time in photos when I was in seminary. And oh, my Lord, they are just, it's just holes in the ground under buildings, dark dungeons, nothing in there, rocks, no walls, dirt, mud, filth. So here he is. He got sold to slavery by his brothers. He had this ability, this great gift. And now he rises to the ranks of the top dog in his organization where his master had him do that. Then he gets charged with the crime he never did. Then he goes to prison, and now he's in this dark place. Now, at the time, the Pharaoh, he had gotten a little upset with two of his guys, his actual butler, his senior butler, and his senior baker. And so he didn't like him. He was teed off at him. So he sent him to prison. I kind of like that idea. If any of my employees or coworkers are not behaving, you're off to prison. So he sends these two cats to prison. They're down there and they have dreams, right? So the dream happens and they're talking about it. What does this mean? And they don't know. No one knows. But Joseph's like, hey, I can help you with that. And so he tells them what the dream means. And it all comes to pass. They're like, whoa. And then they're freed because, again, this was a temporary thing. The Pharaoh really wanted them, but he needed to smack them a little. So they come back to their positions. Forget about Joseph and all of that until the Pharaoh ends up having a dream. Now, before we go to the Pharaoh part, I want to look at Joseph. See, Joseph actually operated on a principle called the law of solid ground. It's in a book called The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership by Dr. John Maxwell. If you are in a business position and any kind of a leadership role in a nonprofit, if you're trying to be the leader of your house, whatever it is, and you don't have the book, The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, I know this sounds very arrogant, but you are not a leader in the highest capacity that you could be if you had that book. It is the greatest book written on leadership ever. And I studied this book actually for 25 years. And I worked with the man who wrote it personally. And I'm here to tell you something, folks. This law of solid ground, here's what happened. Joseph earned trust. He was sold into slavery. He was framed as the adulterer. He was forgotten in prison. Okay, so the adversity for being sold into slavery, what happens? He develops competence. He gets this organization growing for his master. And now he's framed as an adulterer. So how's his comeback? He used his ability to interpret dreams, to solve problems. This was a gift he already had in him. God, why can't you get me out of here? God's not talking because the gift is within him. He already had the answer of how to get out of there. He just needed to use it. He was forgotten in prison. And then what happens? He displays a lot of wisdom. And he does this by going ahead and interpreting Pharaoh's dream, which we're about to get into. So then we're going to get into what happened with Pharaoh. So he used the law called the law of solid ground. Now, John Maxwell is the author of those notes that I just kind of touched on about the story of this. And I encourage you to buy his book. Now, Pharaoh has a dream and he's talking to everybody. And so Pharaoh talks to all his wisdom, all the guys in his council, all the spiritual leaders, all the wise men in the country, and nobody can tell him the dream and what it means. And I'm not going to go all the details what the dream was about. But finally, the head butler and the head baker, they kind of, hey, listen, there's the head butler and me when we were down there, the baker, he had a dream and this guy interprets it. And it was all true. It was all came to pass. So he summons him up there. Two things about the Pharaoh that I want you to catch on that's important for leadership. Number one, the Pharaoh, he showed remarkable wisdom, and he also showed this ability to take his ego and put it aside. A man that's in prison can solve my problem. Are you kidding me? He's a slave. That's what most people would say. And so when I started a lot of my businesses, everyone would always tell me, you need to hire the best salesman in the world. Actually, I don't want any of the ones that, if they have great sales experience, I didn't hire anybody. I wanted a guy and a gal who had no knowledge. They're empty up here. There's nothing in there. So that cup, if it's full and I go to pour stuff in there, what happens? It just overflows and falls out. So I want someone that had no wisdom in there for the areas that I was going to teach them, so that I could pour that wisdom in. And I took people from making $15,000 to $20,000, and they all were making over $100,000 every single year, like that. No college degrees, no nothing. And to this day, most of them are making somewhere around between $500,000 and $1 million. So Pharaoh had the insight. And I like to say like me, but the truth is he was before me, like, I don't know, 4 to 500 years before, 4 to 5,000 years before me. So I had insight like Pharaoh, I should say. I learned from Pharaoh. It's like, okay, you don't need to know everything. You just need to know a guy. You guys know one of my sayings. I might know a guy. I know a guy. I got problems with taxes. I know a guy. I got a problem with this. I know a guy. Well, the Pharaoh was like that. And so he didn't need to know everything. And so he was humble. He could check his ego. And in a crucial time, he didn't know the dream was going to be this crucial. But he gets Joseph up there and Joseph interprets it. He was humble and allowed Joseph to tell him what was going to happen. And in a nutshell, he pretty much told him, your whole kingdom's going to, fall under. There's going to be this massive famine in the whole globe over here. And people are going to be, without anything. And if your kingdom doesn't prepare right now, all these years before it happens, you're going to be pretty much all your wealth's going to go away and your whole kingdom's going to fall apart. People are going to die in mass quantities. And there's a little more to it, but I want to get to this part of what I'm pointing at. He had a gift and God gave that gift to him. You have a gift. What is your gift? What is it? See, I don't need a voice to tell me when I'm saying, God, what do I do? What do I do? God gave me these gifts, so they're in me. See, God is around us. God is in us. God is us. We are with God. We are God. I know you're like, oh my God, you didn't just call yourself God, did you? No, I said we are with God. God is in us. We are God. We as God. We are working with God as one. When my son is with me, my son is me. We are one. Yeah, we're two different people and we have two different personalities, but we're really one. And so it's the same thing with God. And Joseph understood that principle. And as a boy, he became very favored in his father's house. As a slave, very favored. In prison, very favored. And now, coming out of prison, what happens? Joseph, the king says, do it. Do everything you see fit. And he takes this big old ring off and he says, this is the ring of the Pharaoh. And he places it on his hand and says, with this ring, you, Joseph, have the authority as I do. If I am out playing with the lions in the field and any decision in the kingdom is to be made, it is you, Joseph, who has the signet ring. You are to act as Pharaoh. All things were handled through Joseph. Wow. Seriously? The guy was sold as a slave, a fake charge of rape, imprisoned, and now he is, in essence, Pharaoh? Oh, baby. He listened to this gift inside of him. God already gave it to him at the beginning. And so he nurtured that gift over time. What gifts have you been given? What have you not nurtured? What have you tried to nurture? I would love to help you nurture that gift. And that's one of my talents. One of my gifts is to help people find that gift and then nurture it and let them rise up and rise up and rise up. Sometimes it's calling them and saying, hey, I know the next step in your life. We need to work on this book together. And this is going to change your life. And they start reading it and bam, their mind gets exploded. How did you know I needed this right now? It's one of my gifts. So I can take people from this position here and just keep elevating them, lifting their lid, lifting their lid, lifting their lid until they are so high up there that they have accomplished everything. They are now like Pharaoh. And Joseph, not only did he save the entire kingdom of Egypt, he also had the chance to have his brothers have to come to him because of that famine. And it all came to pass. The dream all came to pass. And people say, that's just some crazy Bible story. Yeah, guess what? There's a lot of stories that are sometimes theoretical, being like they're trying to give you an example. Here's something that happened. But at the same time, there's a lot of them that are actually did happen. And there's documents showing this massive famine back then. So we know it happened. And this man, we also know that he was the second in command. We actually have documents showing his actual burial, like a pharaoh's tomb, one of the most ornate in Egypt. Now, there's no body in there. That doesn't make sense, but it does, because upon his death, he had his family take his body out of that tomb and bury it in the land of his fathers. And so this is an amazing story. And here's this man who didn't have to continue to say, hey, God, what do I do? Hey, God, how do I get out of slavery? Hey, God, how do I get out of prison? Hey, God, how do I? No. He didn't have to do that. And then his own brothers had to come to him and beg for food and to borrow, because Joseph had stored all these things up for the famine. And then that's a whole other story I'm not going to get into. But his family was finally restored. And they, of course, apologized over time. And there's some funny stories to go with it. But we're going to stop on that because I want to end in just a minute or two with this concept. What is the gift inside of you? If you say, I don't know, then you have not done your job on finding out what your calling in life is. Some say, well, I'm called to be a teacher. Well, that's amazing. So what is your gift? Is it patience? And is it ability to talk to a child or a student or a high schooler or a college, collegiate level? What is the gift? You have the ability to help someone like myself who had learning disabilities, they said, and able to show me I actually can overcome all that stuff, and that I have no learning disabilities, that they're actually things that are an advantage. What is your gift? I go to my school teacher. I just got back from a trip with a couple of the board members in California. And I showed them this house where a lady named Mrs. Metz lived. And it was a beautiful home in my hometown. And this home meant a lot to me. And it was because of this teacher. And she had a class that was for special ed students. And it was the first time I ever was put into a special ed class. They said I was retarded. I know a bunch of you are going to get offended, right? You can't say retarded. That's not proper. When I was in there, they called it retarded. And if you were called a retard, you have the right to call it retarded. And if you got a problem with that, why don't you come look me up? I'm kidding. So here's what happened. I get in there, and I got a bunch of students around me, and I'm looking, and I'm like, oh, my God, I guess I am special. Okay, stupid person. And she overheard me talking to myself. And so she comes over and she goes, Jonathan. I said, yes, Mrs. Metz. She goes, I need to talk to you about something. It's very important, but we got to go over to my desk where none of the other students can hear you. Okay. I figured I was in trouble. So I go over to her desk and she leans over and she goes, I need you to know something. I've been a teacher and she was a teacher for so many decades. She goes, you're a genius. And I'm like, what? Okay. What did you just say? She said, you're a genius. And I'm like, why am I in the class that they call the retards? She goes, oh, honey, I don't know if you know this, but this class is for people who are actually geniuses. The other teachers aren't smart enough to teach them. And she told me this thing, and I'm like, she goes, but shh, because you're the smartest one of all the geniuses here. And I'm like, man, my chest, little kid, skinny little Ronnie, little blonde hair, blue, green eyes, and just, I'm the smartest of all the geniuses. Now, you might laugh, but here's the funny thing. Years later, when I ended up getting an IQ test and finding out how smart I actually was, let me tell you something. I already knew it. And I accomplished so much. Even though it was dark things like running a drug ring between the ages of 12 and a half and 13, okay? I ran a drug ring. I made over $20,000 a month. I never kept a dime of it, by the way, in case the IRS is listening. I gave it all away to my guys. $20,000. I streamlined an entire apartment complex to make sure none of my guys would get shot anymore. No drive-bys could occur. I was a child. No, I was a genius because Mrs. Metz said so. She lifted my lid so much that I could shoot to the stars on another galaxy and come back to ours. Now, I don't know about you, but who have you been listening to? And if you're listening to people that tell you, well, you got ADHD and you're disabled and you're this, Look at them and say, thank you. And then turn around and say, oh my God, I'm a genius. Because you are. You see, I have belief that you can accomplish anything. I have belief that you can do anything. I had a friend of mine in the hospital recently, and when I was called to come and pray because he wasn't coming out of the coma, all I did was whisper some things in his ear. And all of a sudden, he started fighting. He started coming alive. Things changed. Was it me? Not at all. He got in touch with God in him. He went to know thyself, and in knowing thyself realized, I have the power of the Creator. Jesus in the New Testament said, you will go on to do greater things than I. Wow. He walked on water and raised the dead. He multiplied food, fed thousands, clothed the naked, did all these amazing things. And we get to go to do greater things than that? All right. I must be that kind of a genius. That's what you got to start saying to yourself. And if you're not around a church and people and a spiritual center that is like this, where it's inclusive, where we have people that are Muslim, we have people that are Buddhists, Hindus, Christian, all kinds of faiths, and they're not supportive in an inclusive manner, gay, straight, black, white, they're not supportive like that, run away. It's real simple. Tune in with us. We've got a network. Hop on our church website. We've got some of the smartest brains, psychiatrists, psychologists. These guys are amazing. You should see what one of our bishops wrote. There's a great article recently about free will. And there's many more. Bishop Andrew Loki Sardi did an amazing one right after the one about free will from Bishop John Sardi. And I encourage you to plug in more to the church. Every week we take out groups out into the mountains and explore and go river rafting and climb glaciers and overcome fears and obstacles, because we are lid lifters here at this church. We don't just talk this stuff. We live coexisting, okay? Our church symbol is tattooed right on my arm right there. You can see it up in the corner of the website. This is something we live, breathe. And everybody in this organization, the reason we support it is because it's the right thing to lift lids and take people to the top that they can be. But a lot of times we forget the answer is within us. We don't even have to go out and search it. Just go within and search. So this week, answer this question. What is my gift? What is my calling? What am I gifted with? And let us help nurture that for you guys. I love you. You know the drill. Live positive, but as you live positive, do me a favor. Let's live positive in the gift that we have been given. And make sure we're not wasting it. I love you guys. We'll see you next week.